What's up, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Knuckles the Echidna here, and I am from the likes of the Mexi Toys videos here. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our yet another new Sonic Let's Play for the channel, and this time we're going on to a different game of any sort, which appears to be Sonic & Knuckles, or should I say Sonic & Knuckles standalone version, because remember what Sonic did say this before, about the fact that both Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Sonic & Knuckles was meant to be one game, but of course, due to time constraints, the games is split into two games. So, we've already tackled the films of the first half of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 complete, which appears to be Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version thanks to Sonic. So here we are now on to the films of the 12th of November, which is by the films of today's schedule, by the way. Here we actually get ourselves the second half of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 complete, which appears to be Sonic and Knuckles. So, yeah, basically Sonic & Knuckles standalone version also came out in 1994, and generally speaking that was about the fact that the biggest differences when it comes to two of those releases with both Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version alongside with Sonic & Knuckles standalone version is that obviously though Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version did came out in early 1994, and meanwhile for Sonic & Knuckles that came out in late 1994, and generally speaking what's unique about the films of Sonic & Knuckles anyway, in terms of back in the day in 1994, it does manage to contain a different shape cartridge, which appears to be, well, something like a mini tower of any sort, and I'll explain more details about that if we somehow manage to dive into this game, basically. So anyway, so here's the films of Sonic & Knuckles, by the way, for the Sega Mega Drive / Sega Genesis if you lived in North America. Now, if you ever played Sonic the Hedgehog 3 before, Sonic's moveset is basically unchanged, because obviously that was about the fact he can still perform a spin dash, and on top of that he can also perform this very devastating instant shield if you really want to try to deal with certain annoying enemy encounters and stuff like that. And also, much like the films of how it does in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version, there's going to be some elemental shields that's going to be still present, because obviously though, this is technically not a sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog 3, it's basically a continuation of the actual exact same story, but there are some slight differences here and there. Like for instance, as you can see, we're about to jump into the first special stage in Sonic & Knuckles standalone version, and it plays pretty similar to the films of how it does in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version, but the biggest difference is that rather than just trying to collect these Super Emeralds, unlike the films of Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined into one, and basically though, instead we are going to be collecting Chaos Emeralds again. So generally speaking though, is that certain special stages, as far as I'm aware, is going to get much tougher, which as a result though, for the most part, I will say, is about the fact that the second special stage is by far the easiest in the game in my eyes, mainly because I keep on looking upon the actual specific gameplay demo if you leave the title screen running. So generally speaking that's all I can really think about it. And of course, as you can tell, the reason why I'm actually going to be ignoring these rings this time around is most likely because, well, despite the fact that unlike in Sonic 3 standalone version, basically though, that game does have the file save system. That's not the case in Sonic & Knuckles, I'm afraid, so this means we have to go for the entire game with one single sitting, and it's also meant about the fact that you're only going to be playing as two different playable characters in this particular second half of the entire Sonic 3 complete, or should I say with the continuation. Well, it's hard for me to explain, because I know for a fact that it's been about, well, let's just say for instance, it's about the fact that, well, if you're probably wondering, where is the films of the continuation parts of Donkey Kong Country 2 for the Game Boy Advance, if you're probably wondering? Well, long story short though, unfortunately though, the continuation parts of the films of that particular game has officially been delayed, probably due to quite a number of things. First of all, technical difficulties, obviously, and second of all is about the fact that unfortunately though, Silver the Hedgehog has suffered illness, so generally speaking though, yeah, he definitely needs some bit of rest from now on, although luckily though, for I've heard that Blaze the Cat, she's still going to be playing through the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game, and generally speaking though, as you know, recently recently though, as I explained this before, Sonic the Hedgehog, he did recently finish up the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version, so that's why about the fact that the uploading schedules for that game was going to take place in a weekend, and as far as I'm aware, is that the weekend, or should I say with the forms of the uploading schedules for this game this time around, it's most likely going to be taking place on Tuesdays and Thursdays from now on, just because no matter what though, is that Sonic & Knuckles as a game itself is a little bit longer in comparison to the forms of how it does it on this standalone version of Sonic 3, mainly because as far as I'm aware, if you couldn't tell already, I'm still going to be able to try to go after all seven of these Chaos Emeralds, but not just by the forms of Sonic by himself, but also I'm about to be doing 2 playthroughs of this game, so generally speaking though, just to able to know to compare the forms of 2 of those playthroughs respectively. So obviously though is about the fact that this is actually the first ever Sonic game that you can able to actually play as Knuckles throughout the entire Sonic franchise, so which will continue that tradition before, you know, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Heroes, Sonic 06, and much more. There are a few exceptions here and there though, like for instance though, I don't think Knuckles is not going to be playable for the sake of the forms of Sonic X Shadow Generations, but he does though for the likes of most recent Sonic games at the time, which appears to be Sonic Mania and Sonic Origins Plus, or Sonic Origins to be more specifically, and also Sonic Superstars as well. So generally speaking though, you probably get the idea what I'm talking about. So, now of course, about the fact, as I mentioned this before, I will try my best able to actually do the special stages within the first attempt or 2, and you know what I mean about the fact that when it comes to trying to find those giant rings, it can be quite well hidden sometimes, but as soon as you're able to actually memorize where they are, like I do, then I basically guarantee about the fact I don't think it's possible we can able to actually get all 7 Chaos Emeralds in one particular zone, I'm afraid, unlike the forms of how it does it in, I would say in Sonic Origins, that basically though, we did indeed manage to able to claim all 7 Chaos Emeralds, or should I say, Super Emeralds as far as I'm aware, because yes, unlike the forms of how it does it in Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined, you do have additional 7 more Emeralds, which appears to be known as the Super Emeralds, and then if you collect them all, assuming if you manage to able to play as either Sonic or Knuckles, you're able to actually turn into hyper versions of themselves, except Tails, because as far as I'm aware, the Chaos Emeralds does not let Tails become Super Tails unless you collect all 7 of these Super Emeralds and then you turn into Super Tails, at least specifically in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, whilst unlike in Sonic Mania, alongside with the forms of Sonic Superstars as well, that basically though Tails can able to actually turn into super form of himself with regular Chaos Emeralds, so that's something I suppose. So anyway though, and obviously though is about the fact that there's also another differences here and there as well. Like, for instance, though, is about the fact that, as far as I'm aware, that basically, though, that certain bonus games are actually a lot different. So I don't think it's possible we can able to actually play the Gumball Machine game, unlike in Sonic 3's standalone version. So I believe there's only 2 bonus games we can only interact with, which, as a result, once again, we do need to collect a certain amount of rings, and if you do activate the checkpoint post, basically though, you can able to actually see 2 different sparkle colors, which represents yellow and red. I believe the yellow one will take you to the slot machine one, and there's also the red one, which as a result though, yeah, we'll talk more about that if we somehow manage to trigger these. So, anyways though, so here we go onto the first zone in Sonic & Knuckles, or technically the 7th zone if you really want to experience, you know what I'm saying, with Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined into one. And basically though, here we actually got ourselves Mushroom Hill Zone, which is filled to the brim with mushrooms. So, although, despite the fact that the red plumber Mario was nowhere to be found in this particular place, well, that's just mainly because, as far as I'm aware, we ended up in this forest environment with mushrooms. So yeah, that's why I classify that. And generally speaking, I was about the fact that we're not exactly at the Mushroom Kingdom or anything else like that. So, but I digress though. As I mentioned this earlier, ever since whenever we start this video up actually, well, recently though, it was about the fact that, well, today's date of course here is the 12th of November today, in some cases in 2024 today, and recently though, for those of you able to experience Disney Plus already, recently though, Deadpool and Wolverine has officially finally came out on Disney Plus. So naturally speaking though, at least I don't have to worry about just trying to get the physical DVD version for the time being, just because no matter what though is about the fact, as you probably already expect, that I'm basically almost running out of space for my shelving, and it's especially noticeable concerning for the fact that we still got this one empty slot left in terms of the shelving anyway. Plus it's mainly because we're about to be saving up for the Switch successor that I keep on hearing about, despite the fact that for whatever reason, Sonic just somehow managed able to say that he basically gave up on the actual specific hype about Switch 2 for the time being. Well, at the very least though, at least Blaze the Cat has already mentioned about this ever since about a week ago, that at the very least we got something out of it, which obviously though that she did say that backwards compatibility has been confirmed for the Nintendo Switch successor. So as a result though, it's actually very similar to the phones of not only for the likes of, you know, Game Boy and Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance when it comes to backwards compatibility, and on top of that with Nintendo DS all the way up to Nintendo 3DS, and on top of that with Nintendo GameCube all the way up to Nintendo Wii, and on the subject for the Wii, obviously though Nintendo Wii to Wii U when it comes to backwards compatibility, and yeah, and same applies with the phones of, well, technically if you really want to count, you know what I'm talking about with PlayStation 3, with PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 stuff, assuming about the fact that depending on what model you get, like for instance though, the 2007 original model, or should I say technically 2006 actually, because obviously though the PlayStation 3 did somehow first came out back in 2006 either way, and generally speaking though, that particular model does have the ability to play not only PlayStation 1 stuff, but as well as PlayStation 2 stuff as well, although it is still possible we can able to actually get PlayStation 2 digital stuff nowadays with PlayStation 3, even though despite the fact that it's kind of unfortunate as far as what Blaze has already mentioned about this before, basically though, several of games will be delisted until specifically until next month from now, which appears to be the 6th of December, so, and I suppose I've somehow managed to found a list actually about the fact that there are a bunch of games will be delisted for not only for Steam, but as well as Xbox systems, PlayStation systems, and even one of those compilation games for the Nintendo Switch, but I'll explain more details about that in a moment. So, and as far as I'm aware, did you guys know about the fact as far as technically Silver the Hedgehog has already mentioned about this before, that one of those Nintendo Directs did manage to take place on the 5th of November in 2014? Yeah, apparently that particular Direct has been out for about 10 years ago now. Now I do remember back in the day, where I was incredibly excited for the launch of some upcoming Nintendo 3DS stuff, in addition to some Wii U stuff here and there. Like, for instance though, I was incredibly excited and hyped at the same time whenever I see The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D was finally gets revealed. In addition to that though, same applies with the forms of Splatoon as well, and even especially noticeable with Mario Kart 8 DLC Pack number 1, which does manage to feature not only 3 playable characters, which appears to be Tanuki Mario, Cat Peach, and Link from The Legend of Zelda. In addition to that though, Ultimate NES remakes for the Nintendo 3DS, alongside with the forms of Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker, Shovel Knight, and a bunch more. And there's also with the forms of how in fact I do honestly still remember back then whenever I did saw the forms of Kirby and the Rainbow Paintbrush trailer, and I was a little bit skeptical at first, but then we did somehow got the game until specifically in sometime in the 2020s era. At least thankfully though, we actually got the game brand new sealed, by the way, although that's besides the point, despite the fact I still haven't exactly touched upon that game for a while, mainly because again I do need to get used to with the main mechanics of the game, even though it's about the fact that it's kind of unfortunate about the fact I'm only going to be glued onto the Wii U gamepad rather than on the TV screen, so that's definitely a bit of a missed opportunity I might add. Well, usually that some people were still really hoping about the fact that the Switch ports will be existed, which is definitely a bit of a tricky situation going on at this point, because at this rate, we've only down to it for about 3 specific Nintendo Switch games left before we move on to the Switch successor coming up. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that, well, some people seem to say, well, they somehow did the video of this about the fact that what other Wii U games was expected to be coming over to the Nintendo Switch at some point, or specifically like Switch successor or something. Like, they did suggest about the fact that there are little amount of games that could possibly get ported over to the Nintendo Switch before they move on to the Switch successor. Like, for instance, though, they've mentioned about the forms of, you know, The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker HD, alongside with Twilight Princess HD, which I'm still really hoping that'll be the case before they move on to the Switch successor. And if not, though, they'll save it up for Switch successor for 4K support. And it could be possible though, and as far as I'm aware, when it comes to the forms of Yoshi's Woolly World, I would certainly wish if that would come to the Switch or Switch successor. Again, it really depends on it really though, but that's just mainly because we are still waiting for the actual specific announcement of this thing, until, to be more specifically, after the forms of the final financial results of the regular Nintendo Switch financial results anyway. So, anyway, and as you can see, we've got one more Chaos Emerald left, and suffice to say, we'll definitely get ourselves the final Chaos Emerald until the next zone, which appears to be, well, we're probably gonna have to save that particular topic if we get around to it. So, also, I do still love the fact that in Journey Forms within Mushroom Hill Zone, specifically in Act 1 and Act 2, I love the actual transition with the forms of that particular let's just say a different background for the colors and everything, and same applies with the forms of those different colored mushrooms, by the way, because usually in Act 1, that everything else is all likely a springy vibes, or likely a nice little bright colorful vibes, whilst in Journey Forms within Act 2, and basically though, we actually come across into two different seasonal changes or something like that. Although, as you can tell, we somehow deal with the first boss in the game already as Sonic, so yeah, it shouldn't give me that much trouble or anything. So anyway, Mushroom Hill Zone is completely done as Sonic, and now we're going to be proceed into the next zone. So again, I want to say this for this point, it's about the fact that these videos might go to be a lot more lengthier. And jeez, what the heck is up with this sound again? I mean, we've already on about that, and I'm sure that Sonic is already on about it, since in the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version. Although, as far as you can definitely tell for this point, that much like the forms of how it does it in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version, the actual specific method of this recording session I'm going to be filming this is by the forms of, once again, the Sega Mega Drive Ultimate Collection. Although, kind of think about it though, this will be a true definition of the final time we're able to actually utilize with the Sega Mega Drive Ultimate Collection, at least for now anyway, until God knows about the fact that several fans out there was curious enough of what specific games we'd like to tackle through next, aside from Sonic though. But then again, we'll have to wait and see what happens in due time, and as you can see, we're now on the forms of Flying Battery Zone, and generally speaking, I was about the fact that obviously though, in regards to the forms of Mushroom Hill Zone, not only does it bring back from the likes of one of those Sonic fighting games, which appears to be Sonic the Fighters for the arcade machines, but it's also about the fact that that stage will obviously make its return from the likes of Sonic Generations for the 3DS in the classic era. And generally speaking though, yeah, we'll save that particular topic if we get on to doing our redo Let's Play of Sonic Generations for the 3DS before we dive into, you know, Sonic X Shadow Generations for sure. So anyway, as you can tell about the fact that in this bonus area right here, it looks very similar to the ones to how it does in Sonic 1, doesn't it? However though, you don't get a Chaos Emerald this time, so instead you have to utilize with the slot machine, and I was gonna say that right from the start though, I'm not a big fan of the slot machine bonus stage anyway. That's mainly because I remember back in Journey Forms of at some point in 2023, I suppose about the fact that Sonic has already tackled through Sonic Origins though. Basically though, he keep on getting himself screwed over by the forms of keep on getting Eggmans for about so many times, and Journey Forms of this whole entire process of Sonic 3 and Knuckles game on Sonic Origins though, and suffice to say that I'm really hoping I don't want to able to come across into that particular random slot machine thingy again. Although I will say my favorite bonus stage in the entire game for me though anyway, which appears to be of course the falls around with Gravity Ball and stuff like that. So generally speaking though, yeah, you see what I mean, if we get onto that particular bonus area no matter what, or the bonus stage I should say. So anyway though, also about the fact that I honestly still remember back then in regards to the forms of while looking back on that particular Nintendo Direct on the 5th of November in 2014, at least as far as I'm aware, that I was really hoping about the fact that Mario Party 10 will get its mentioned. Well, it's not going to be until specifically by the end of 2014, and I honestly, for whatever reason, I just somehow managed able to get mad about it if Mario Party 10 was not mentioned, until I realized about the fact that that game has now become one of the worst console Mario Party games now, mainly because of the lack of content, and on top of that, the gameplay style is very similar to Mario Party 9, at least to be more specifically in Mario Party mode, and on top of all that stuff though, certain aspects is a little bit unbalanced when it comes to likely for Bowser Party anyway, and pretty much anything else what you expect. So anyway though, but I very appreciate about the fact that every nowadays we've got superior Mario Party games these days, specifically on the Nintendo Switch, which appears to be not only Mario Party Superstars, but alongside with the forms of Super Mario Party Jamboree as well, even though despite it does have some issues from time to time, but then again, we'll mention more about the forms of Super Mario Party Jamboree until next year for the time being. So anyway, let's shove this little spiky thing right there, and there's the final giant ring right there. And now, soon enough, we're able to actually get into the final special stage in Sonic & Knuckles, basically. And this is without a doubt is the hardest special stage in the entire game, unless if you really want to also count the forms of Sonic & Knuckles combined into one, but that's besides the point. Because basically, though, you have to be pixel perfect in order to try to turn left and right at one point, and there are a few rare occasions about the fact that if you hop onto this little, yellow sphere right here, that will actually flings you into the other bit of the special stage, and if you dare get bumped, be sure about the fact that you have to press left or right, depending on what direction you go into, immediately, until you don't want to able to actually touch the red spheres. So generally speaking, though, is about the fact that obviously, though, this particular special stage will, definitely felt a bit trickier enough. So regardless of everything else though, what to expect. It's the final special stage in Sonic & Knuckles standalone version anyway, and luckily enough though, there's the 7th and the final Chaos Emerald. So yeah, it's actually kind of a similar structure as the forms of the method of getting these Chaos Emeralds, which that was also happened and during the forms of when Sonic actually did Sonic 3 standalone version. So anyway, speaking of which though, much like the forms of how it does in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 standalone version, if you collect 50 rings, and soon enough though, you have the ability to choose between either turn into Super Sonic or not, by simply able to actually press the jump button in midair. So anyway though, assuming of course about the fact that if you do manage to able to have the elemental shields with you or something, but I digress. And I believe there's also yet another giant ring right there. And of course, just like before, if you grab the forms of another giant ring, then obviously though you get 50 additional rings into your disposal. So that way it really helps you a lot, even if you really desperately want to turn into Super Sonic immediately though. So yeah, that's as far as I can imagine for saying that. So anyways though, in terms of Flying Battery Zone, obviously though, out of all the actual zones in the entire, not just by the forms of Sonic & Knuckles standalone version, but alongside with the forms of Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined into one, Flying Battery Zone is by far the best looking zones in the entire game to me though, not only because it's very atmospheric, but it's also, I really still enjoy the music in the zone, and it's definitely way more catchier until whenever we dive into Act 2 of Flying Battery Zone. And as you can tell, we're about to be dealing with, without a doubt, is the most pathetic bosses in the entire game, unless if you become Super Sonic, or at one point, Hypersonic if you manage to play Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined into one. So anyway, oh dear, I just somehow realized I'm about to die at one point, because as you can tell, I have no rings! Ah, dang it, I somehow slipped up. Oh well, that was probably my fault anyway, and it's even bad enough about the fact that we have to do this boss fight without any rings. So yeah, might be up for the challenge for this point, especially we don't want to get poked by the forms of that particular spiky ball onto its attachable arm. So yeah, wish me luck I suppose. But I digress. So as far as I'm aware, back into what I was saying about the forms of how the fact that I still even remember back then, in regards to the forms of the Nintendo Direct in November 5th in 2014, that I was very excited about the forms of some more stuff has been revealed. well, I wasn't really into the forms of other stuff in general, aside from, you know, Zelda Majora's Mask 3D, alongside with the forms of Ultimate NES Remix, in addition to the forms of Mario Kart 8 DLC Pack 1, and on top of that with Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, specifically the UK version specifically, as I was on about that earlier, and in addition to that though with the forms of I would say Splatoon. Well, despite the fact that back in the day I wasn't really into it at first, but then I just somehow give the series another chance until in 2016 rolls around. All thanks to the forms of Splatoon 2 has finally became a thing until at some point in 2017 for the Nintendo Switch. And generally speaking though, I still find it a little bit of a baffling side of things when Splatoon 1 never gets re-released on the Nintendo Switch, because aside from all the fact that we actually got 2 sequels of Splatoon on one specific system nowadays on the Nintendo Switch, so it makes it pretty obvious about the fact I highly doubt that Splatoon 1 will never get re-released on Nintendo Switch at some point, because obviously though we've already got several DLC for Splatoon 3 these days. Well, to be more specifically, 2 packs of you know what I'm talking about with DLC for Splatoon 3, but either way, that'll be a topic for a later time. And also I do honestly still remember they somehow revealed not only the HD version of Pikmin short movies, but same as with the forms of the 3D version as well for the 3DS. Well, mind you, I never actually got the actual app anyway, because every nowadays those particular short movies are now available for YouTube. So generally speaking, it might be seems a little bit redundant these days, especially concerning for the fact that obviously though the Nintendo eShop, not only for the Wii U, but as well as the 3DS as well, has already been, well, passed away, you know, ever since Journey Falls it around a year ago. So, geez, I can't even believe it's been about a year ago already. Remind you about the fact that some Toys Else, including Maxi himself, has already gone on and on and on about it ever since about a couple of months ago. And it's even bad enough that the online functionality is now no longer functioning for both the Wii U and 3DS now, because, you know, things has been moved on, so I guess it's very understandable, but it's just about the fact that we really do miss the old days, you know, because that's the thing, because of the forms of nostalgia factor. So yeah, nostalgia is a very strong word for it though, which gee, no wonder why that one of those characters in Inside Out 2 was technically made its appearance, despite the fact that, well, obviously I'm not going to spoil things too much if those you have not seen Inside Out 2 already, but I will still say you can still able to recommend that film, by the way. It's also worth noting for actually, we actually got ourselves a brand new poster has been revealed for the likes of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie, and while looking on it though, it looks incredible, especially concerning for the fact that, for one, obviously though, Sonic and Shadow has almost clashed each other when it comes to like running and stuff like that, which obviously though it does remind me like a similar vibes almost as the forms of, well, let's just say Sonic Adventure 2 vibes or something like that. And it's also worth noting for is about the fact that it will indeed still about to be releasing until the 20th of December for North American version, and if I recall correctly, the UK version might wait until for a little while, at least if I can recall it correctly, although I may be wrong. And speaking of which though, is about the fact that obviously though, much like the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 1 movie, in addition to Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie as well, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie will be once again be rated as in PG, at least in the American version anyway. Now I suppose that can probably does the same thing for the UK version as well, but I suppose we'll find out more about it until for about next month for right now. So generally speaking though, is about the fact that now, if you're probably wondering about the fact that how come my score count is actually much lower in comparison to the forms of our playthrough of not only Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles combined into one, not only back in 2017, but also with the forms of 2023 if you count the Sonic Origins compilation game. And on top of that, with Sonic 3 standalone version, well, this is mainly because I just want to able to actually make this entire playthrough as quickly as possible, especially concerning for the fact that, like I stated this before, Sonic and Knuckles standalone version might be considered to be a little bit longer in comparison to Sonic 3 alone. But I digress. Time to tackle for the next boss fight. So, obviously though, Flying Battery Zone will be eventually be brought back during the forms event Sonic Mania, which I do honestly appreciate because I still managed to really enjoy every single aspect in terms of Flying Battery Zone, especially concerning for the fact that not only for its atmosphere, but it's also I still really enjoyed the music itself as well, especially Act 2 either way. So anyway, let's just go ahead and do some more instant shields right at the forms of Eggman, and that pretty much does it for Flying Battery Zone. I mean, sure, no matter what though, it only took about 5 minutes to complete, unless if you really want to able to get so much more distractions for, you know what I'm saying, with the bonus stages and stuff like that, but I digress. So now we're about to be approaching on to, most people find this next zone to be without a doubt is their least favorite zones in the entire game, at least if you also want to include Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined into one. Basically though, we now ended up in Sandopolis zone, and well, I will admit though, Act 1 is actually fantastic, because not only because of the music, but also I really love the background details for the actual skylines and stuff like that, especially because it almost reminds me like I was experiencing the actual desert, while the actual sun time was actually in sunset in the background, which I honestly do appreciate with this particular vibes of the actual color choices in the background, but nothing even compared to the forms of Act 2 though, which I'm sure there are a lot of Sonic players out there knows exactly what I'm talking about right here. So anyway, aside from all that stuff though, let's get on to the forms of the continuation discussions about several of the remaining Wii U games will be ported over to the Switch at some point. Well, I highly doubt that Nintendo Land will not make it, in addition to Game & Wario, because both of those games heavily utilizes the Wii U gamepad, and on top of all that stuff though, that could be also applies for maybe Paper Mario Color Splash as well, and suffice to say though, that game is now being overshadowed thanks to the forms of the existence of the remake of the Thousand Year Door for Paper Mario for the Nintendo Switch anyway, which I will still say that the Thousand Year Door is without doubt the best Paper Mario games I have ever played, alongside with the forms of the good old classic Nintendo 64 game as well, which is simply called Paper Mario of course. So anyway, that'll be a discussion for a later time, if possible, but anyway though, oh son of a biscuit, that stupid little scorpion enemy just somehow managed to caught me off guard. Well, who knows anyway, because, well, as you can tell, I've already got 50 rings right now, which I could potentially try to turn into Super Sonic at one point, which I accidentally did either way. But of course, unfortunately though, unlike in Hypersonic form, that I can't utilize with the actual double jump or anything else like that, or in some cases act like a screen nuke if I jump in midair and stuff like that. What I found was a little bit odd though is about the fact that when it comes to Sonic & Knuckles as a standalone game, I don't think it's possible we can able to come across into any water sections here and there, because as far as I'm aware, the bubble shield might be a little bit redundant for the likes of the majority of the levels from Sonic & Knuckles standalone version, but I do know it's very understandable for the sake of the forms of Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined, but I digress. So, and in terms of everything else though, for like Wii U games ported over to the Nintendo Switch at some point, I don't think it's possible that Splatoon 1 will not make it, and I believe that could be also applies with Star Fox Zero and Star Fox Guard or anything else like that, because both of those games heavily utilizes with the Wii U gamepad. And on top of all that stuff though, apparently a lot of people seem to get very tired of the forms of rehashed story elements for Star Fox Zero, because it's just a retelling of the forms of Star Fox 64 all over again, except with the forms of new graphics made by Platinum Games, who also did not only Bayonetta, but as well as the forms of the Wonderful 101, because at the very least, the Wonderful 101 has already been made it onto the Nintendo Switch back in during the forms of at some point in a lockdown, alongside with the forms of other platforms as well, but you get the idea what I was trying to able to explain things on all that stuff. So anyway, now I highly doubt about the fact that Devil's Third will not make it, in addition to Art Academy as well, and same applies with the forms of Wii Party U, and on top of all that stuff though, Wii Fit U and Wii Sports Club. But at the very least, we actually technically already got Nintendo Switch Sports back in 2022, alongside with the forms of some free DLC update rotation, although I highly doubt about the fact I don't think I can able to get that game at this point, because obviously though, I'm a little bit mixed on it though, especially concerning for the fact that I'm a little bit worried about my Joy-Cons for right now, because unfortunately though, one of my Joy-Cons actually got drifted, and as a result though, I'm very annoyed about this. Although, I totally get it about the fact that we had that particular Joy-Con been on for about 7 years now, so I suppose I should probably able to actually like change my Joy-Cons at one point. Well, I'm probably not going to do it right now until specifically what if I decided able to wait until the beginning of 2025 for able to get hyped about, you know, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, to able to actually not only play for the actual version on my spare own time, but eventually at some point I will try to able to show off one of those worlds in particular for in a special occasion. So anyway, so let's go and deal with this particular stone golem thing, and by simply, oh no, how dare you try to able to actually make me lose the shield, or should I say the bubble shield I should say, but whatever. At the very least the stage has already been done. But either way though, that's not to say about the fact that the first act is quite lengthy, but I will still say it still looks fantastic, but nothing even compared to Act 2 of Sandopolis Zone, which means we now ended up inside of the actual pyramid temple itself. And right from the start though, the entire place is all dark and everything, and the main gimmick about this level, as you can tell in Act 2, not only do we have to keep on activating that particular lever to able to actually bring back light, but also we have to keep on utilizing with this particular time switch, because, well, if you do manage to able to activate it, and it's also worth noting for, there's no escape from this point because we have to deal with these annoying pesky ghosts. And over time though, assume when the actual room itself is about to get darker and darker, they will try to attack you. And not to mention though, this little light slide labyrinth kind of section, it really throws me off, especially what if I first got to this point, that at least when Sonic and I have already experienced this on the Sonic Mega Collection back in the day, that my god, we got so many frustrating moments in this level, mainly because of the stupid labyrinth section with the actual slides and everything. But luckily, since we've grown much more older now, we're pretty much used to at this point, especially concerning about the fact that we basically know what to do at this point. So anyway though, oh, and on the subject where it comes to Wii U games will be ported over to the Nintendo Switch, I don't think it's possible about the fact that Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival will not make its way to the Nintendo Switch, because obviously the Wii U gamepad is the main focus of that game. Thus, not to mention though, you have to use an Amiibo a lot in that game. And on top of all that stuff though, Mario Tennis Ultra Smash is also not going to make it, probably because Mario Tennis Aces is much more superior compared to the default of how it does in Ultra Smash. Now I believe that could be also applies for Mario Party 10 as well, because obviously that is about the fact that we've already got much better Mario Party games for the Nintendo Switch, unless if you also want to count not only Mario Party 1, but as well as Mario Party 2 and 3 from the likes of the Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack and all that stuff. So at the very least though, is about the fact that at the very least we can able to experience some mini games in Mario Party 10 onto the Nintendo Switch, all thanks to the existence of Mario Party Superstars. In fact, we actually got some solid ones, but not the best selection either. So I highly doubt about the fact, I don't think it's possible we can able to actually see Fuzzy Flyers or Paintball Battle or anything else like that, I'm afraid. So no, I don't think it's possible we can able to actually see Sonic Lost World will be ported over to the Nintendo Switch, because it's one of those whatever Sonic games, they somehow exist, and it's especially noticeable concerning for the fact that it does manage able to feel a bit kind of generic with all its world themes and stuff like that. Obviously though, they try to inspire us by New Super Mario Bros. In terms of world themes and stuff like that, with all that grassy hill themes, or in some cases the actual grass theme, and the desert theme, the tropical beach theme, and the frozen ice theme, and the jungle theme, or the forest theme I should say, even with the sky theme, and the final area is the volcano themes. And generally speaking though, they just really ripped off, you know what I'm talking about, with the Mario's typical structure. So either way, and I suppose not only that though, is about the fact that one thing I totally forgot to notice something about this is that according to what Sonic did somehow forgot to mention about, that when it comes to Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 as well as Episode 2, both of those games are basically the Sonic's version of New Super Mario Bros. Games, basically, because aside from lacking originality, and on top of all that stuff, though, both of those games plays pretty similar to one another, besides that Episode 1's physics is, well, not that very good these days, especially concerning for the fact that it just feels a bit, you know what I mean, stilted and all that stuff, but I digress. Wow, we're getting so many rings on this very good bonus game right here, which I will say though, I can easily recommend that particular bonus stage no matter what. Way better than the Fonzler slot machine one, that's for sure, because I really cannot take any risks of getting every single Robotniks every time whenever I get into the slot machines and all that stuff, if you know what I'm talking about, that is. So, anyways though, now I don't think it's possible we can able to see Mario and Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Olympic Winter Games and Rio 2016 Olympic Games onto the Switch, because let's face it though, I believe those particular games have now been outdated, and generally speaking though, we are still about to be moving on to the future Olympics at this point. In fact, the next summer ones is going to take place in Los Angeles in 2028, and as far as the next Winter Olympics, as far as I'm concerned, is going to take place in Italy in 2026. So generally speaking, that's roughly about 2 years from now. And not to mention though is about the fact that those two games in particular, it's not that very great when it comes to like review scores alike. Plus it's mainly because they prefer the original trilogy on the Wii, mainly because of multiplayer factor, but on top of all that stuff though, how unique the Dream events are, specifically with the Olympic Winter Games and London 2012 Olympic Games at one point. And it's also about the fact that it has a lot of replayability to top it off. And I also think about the fact that Sonic Boom Rise of Loic is not going to be on the Nintendo Switch, thank God for that, especially concerning for the fact that at this point in time, Sonic Boom as a franchise itself is basically dead in the water, especially concerning for the fact that obviously though, it only lasted for about 3 years, ever since in 2014, all the way up to 2017, because at this point in time, in 2017 and onwards, Sonic the Hedgehog is basically got back on track, all thanks to the forms of the existence of Sonic Mania and onwards, despite the fact that Sonic Forces was a bit mixed bag and all that stuff though. Like, some people like it, and most people seem to really hate it these days, especially concerning with all these levels are ridiculously short, and you get the idea what I'm talking about. So, and I also highly doubt about the fact that NES Remakes Pack is not going to make it onto the Nintendo Switch, sadly, because I would like to see new variants for certain challenges, and I can play these challenges on the go, but instead we actually got the replacement of Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. Although don't get me wrong, I still like the idea, but I do really wish if they were able to actually bring back NES remakes more often, as opposed to that particular inspired by the reality thing back in the day, but I digress. Now, I don't think it's possible that Mario vs. Donkey Kong Tipping Stars will not make it onto the Nintendo Switch either, because after all, we've already did somehow receive the remake of the first game, which I still find is to be more of a superior game in my opinion, but that's besides the point. And on top of all that stuff though, I don't think that Pokemon Rumble U is probably not going to make it either. And in addition to that though, same applies with the forms of Dr. Luigi as well. But there is that particular one game that I suppose that a lot of gamers out there was really hoping about the fact that that game will be get ported over to the Switch, and that's what appears to be Pushmo World, which is basically like a 3D puzzle game, which I definitely heard about it, but I've never actually experienced it for myself. So generally speaking though, yeah, it may look like about the fact that we are now down to, I would say 25 more games left for certain Wii U games will be ported over to, Wii U games will be ported over to the Switch, which I don't think it's possible that all of them will be coming to the Nintendo Switch due to capabilities of the Wii U gamepad, and you pretty much named the rest of it. So anyways though, before we take on the next boss fight right here, we need to like go into the slot machine just for the sake of distractions, I guess. Although so far so good anyway though, we actually got the ridiculous amount of rings. Like, we actually got, you son of a... Okay, whatever. Thankfully, it's only 100 rings though, so yeah, I don't think it's possible we can able to lose every single one. So let's just go ahead and leave instantly. And then, sure enough though, we can able to actually take on the next boss fight in a total breeze, all thanks to the forms of supersonic transformation. So here we go, Egg Golem right here. And then soon enough though, yeah, you don't want to get crushed either, because otherwise if you dare get crushed, you have to do this boss fight in a normal fashion. So with that being said folks, is that we get the endings of this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Sonic & Knuckles standalone version in Sonic Story. That's what it appears to be for the fact that we're going on to the 4th zone, which appears to be Lava Reef Zone. So this will be fun. So I'll see you guys until on Thursday. Later fellas.